What the heck, Land Rover? So today, Case, we're talking about one of our favorite brands, what they're doing, where they're going, and some of the decisions they have made, and whether or not we agree or disagree with what's going on at Land Rover Range Rover.
Yeah, and there's a lot to talk about there, but like you said, this is coming from two Land Rover enthusiasts because both of us actually own our own personal Land Rovers.
Yeah, that's right. And this is not supposed to be demeaning to the brand because a lot of what Land Rover and Range Rover is doing is right on the money. Their company is actually doing pretty well, but we're going to give our 2 cents on some of the more maybe questionable decisions the brand has made, and maybe give them some of our humble advice, not that they should take our advice, on what we think that Land Rover should do to kind of embrace some more of the off-road enthusiasm. So Case, let's start with some sales numbers. If you look at the numbers, the brand is actually doing pretty well, especially for a luxury brand. So in 2019, they sold 94,000 units in the US, 2020, 80,000, 2021, 89,000, 2022, about 60,000, 2023, that number was on its way up again. So if you consider that they're, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively small luxury brand, the numbers are pretty good.
Yeah, and some of those numbers drops could be due to COVID. Kind of tumultuous time, so some ups and downs there.
100%.
But yeah, overall not bad. But you've also got some numbers for specific models.
Yeah, I've got the breakdown. And of course, we have to remember the chip shortage, right? That impacted the whole industry. So this is what I want to talk about with the brand, because I think on the upper end of their products, they're really impressive as to what they do with luxury and design, and actually capability if you look at the Defender, and the market seems to represent that. So let's talk about 2023. Range Rover sold almost 16,000 full-size Range Rovers in 2023. That's a pretty impressive number considering the fact the full-size Range Rover is well over $100,000. I think it starts at like 107 and then goes upwards of 200K. So that's a lot of units.
Yeah, that is quite a few units, like you said, for a very expensive, very premium product.
Yeah.
And more recently, they've come out with a new generation of the full size.
100%, yeah. So a lot of excitement around that product. Range Rover Sport, once again, an expensive vehicle starting over 90,000. 2023, they sold 11,000 of those, so a lot of cars. Defender, I mean, we're looking at sales of over 21,000 Defenders. I mean, that's amazing. So if you look at like the expensive products, the ultra premium products that they sell, they're doing a great job. Where I think Land Rover should focus on going forward is more of the meat of the market, that like $40,000 to $60,000 territory. And the product that they have for that is the Discovery Sport, which is not selling particularly well. So during that same year, when they sold 21,212 Defenders, they only sold 4,300 Disco Sports in the US.
Yeah, which is not a ton, especially compared to, like you're saying, Defender, full-size Range Rover Sport, some of those other models. And I think what you're getting at is that it's a bit of a missed opportunity because that is an area where they could have a really high-volume seller.
100%. And look, same thing with the full-size Discovery. That's doing even worse. 2,400 units sold in the US in 2023. But like, let's take a look at that Discovery Sport space, right? Land Rover Defender, historically competed in form factor with like Bronco and Wrangler in the 90s, even though it was always more expensive. It still is more expensive, starting in the high $50,000 territory. Imagine a Discovery Sport, which was like a baby Defender where you can pull the roof off of, you know, started at $45,000 and then target a much larger audience that's going after like a 4Runner or maybe a Land Cruiser. That could be really cool.
Yeah, because there's a lot of potential in that space to have some really big sellers, even if they took the Discovery Sport in the direction of something like the Bronco Sport, where it doesn't necessarily have to be a ground-up, body-on-frame, rugged 4x4, but you could add a little bit of rugged feature to an otherwise pretty practical everyday crossover. Then you might have yourself a really good seller.
The problem with the Discovery Sport is it's aging, right? 4 years ago, they sold 7,000, which is still not that many, considering they sold way more Range Rovers than Discovery Sports. And you know, in 2024, they've only sold 1,400, so it's an older product. It doesn't offer that much in terms of competitive advantage.
In a hugely competitive space.
Yep. I mean, think of all the BMW, Mercedes, Lexus offerings in that small luxury space. And honestly, I don't think that category of product should be targeting the luxury space because you already have the Evoque and the Velar to do that. So bring that Discovery Sport more down market, make it more rugged, give it some cool cladding, and I think it could be a really popular little seller.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of old school Land Rover people would love to see from the brand, a vehicle that leans a little bit more rugged and comes out of the luxury space, because it seems like there's a little bit of an identity crisis at Land Rover specifically, because it used to be that Range Rover was more of the luxury offering, while Land Rover was a little bit more utilitarian. And now it seems like Land Rover and Range Rover are aiming at the luxury space.
So this is Case's first point, and I think he's onto something here. Now, we have a very kind of skewed view of Land Rover, I think, in the US. Because like if you look in the UK, they had the series models through the 60s and 70s, the Defenders models in the 80s and the 90s that really were almost agricultural farm vehicles.
Yeah.
And then you were just in Spain, actually, or Italy, and Case told me something interesting, that the police cars there are Land Rovers.
Yeah, well, there were Land Rovers all over the place, which was really cool to see. And even as recently as like LR3s, the vehicle that you have here in the States, LR3s were mostly V8s. They were mostly pretty option. They mostly had leather seats and only automatics. But overseas, you could get much more basic versions with cloth
100%.
seats and manual transmissions and even diesel powertrains. Overseas, it's a Discovery 3, not the LR3.
Right.
But here in the States, yeah, it does seem like it's generally been more of the luxury offerings than their more basic utilitarian stuff.
And I kind of understand why, because there's a bigger profit margin, right, in the luxury-oriented vehicles. You can charge more money. But Case's point is right on. It's like, what's the brand difference between a Land Rover and a Range Rover if they're both going to be $85,000? Yeah. And I understand you could make the argument that especially like the Defender is more rugged than a Range Rover Sport, but then the Discovery doesn't look very rugged anymore at all, right?
No.
And where does that fit in the lineup?
Yeah, exactly, which is kind of my second point that I wanted to talk about is especially the Defender, because the Defender is such an iconic name for Land Rover, and it used to be a lot more agricultural. But now the Defender feels like it fills a little bit more of the space that the Discovery used to live in.
That's exactly right. I mean, really, a lot of people said this when the Defender launched, is that this should have been the new, Discovery all along, right?
Yeah.
Full size, large,
fully independent suspension, air springs, right?
Yeah, it's big, comfortable, tows a lot SUV. But there's an argument to be made that maybe this should have been Discovery and Defender could have been something different.
Yeah, almost like what the Grenadier is,
Sure.
right? I think that's what a lot of people wanted to see the Defender become.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I see in your notes too, Case, you talk about how like even the off-road versions of the Defender, right? They have 20-inch wheels, right?
Yeah.
$150,000, right? Crazy suspension. And
yeah,
amazing.
the Octa that's coming up is going to be really cool, and I love that they're putting some slightly more rugged tires on it. But again, with 20-inch wheels and at $150,000, is the Octa really an off-roader, or is it more of a street vehicle with some rugged styling?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I think that that's a great point you bring up, that like even in the UK, they have a panel truck version of the Defender, which is like their work version, still is like 50,000 pounds. It's crazy expensive. But I kind of feel like they should have maybe bring the Defender down market, maybe with the Defender Sport, like you talked about earlier, right? And offer some more rugged versatility at a smaller price. I think that'd be really popular.
Yeah, because again, I think it's just an area of vehicles that enough people are interested in that now an entirely new company has come along and created a vehicle in the Ineos Grenadier to fill the space that Land Rover themselves are not occupying.
I think another cool place that Land Rover could go with the Defender would be a Land Rover Defender pickup variant.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I think that would be really rad, right? And, people now are spending 80, 90, 100 grand on trucks in the US. Why wouldn't they do that with a premium off-road flair in a Defender?
Yeah, because they had a Defender pickup in the past, so there's precedent for it.
What else do you got?
So I also wanted to talk about the Discovery, because we talked a little bit about the Defender, and the Defender seems to live now where the Discovery used to as far as an offering from Land Rover. So then that raises a question for the Discovery itself. And the underpinnings for the Discovery 5, the current Discovery, are not bad at all. It's got some pretty good hardware. I think the styling for a lot of people is where it's a miss, because you look at the LR4 and it was still very slab-sided, boxy, upright. It looked rugged. And then you go from the LR4 to the Discovery 5, and it's a bit of a hard-boiled egg.
I like that word. I think that was a really funny thing you put in your notes. Yeah, I mean, look, if you look at the sales, I would tend to agree. They sold in 2022 under 1,500 Discoveries and 15,000 Defenders, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of feel like where the Defender is at now, that the full-size Discovery 5 doesn't have a place in the market because the Defender looks better. It's similar platform underneath, but it's got more capability. Storage is not really that different. It's actually more in the Defender 130. So like, what's the purpose of the Discovery anymore?
Well, and the other tough thing too is that it's not very well differentiated visually from the Discovery Sport. So if you opt for the bigger, more expensive Discovery, it looks a lot, too much like the Discovery Sport. So it's not necessarily clear which vehicle it is that you're buying. And I think there's some evidence in that if you look at values on early Discovery 5s versus the LR4s that they replaced, some late LR4s are going for more money than early Discovery 5s.
Almost all of them. Yeah. People really like that squared off look, 100%. I think that the 5 design was kind of a miss. They went too upscale, chic with it. They should have gone more down market, squared off rugged, which they kind of did with the Defender. I just don't think it has a purpose in the market. It needs to either, in my opinion, be redesigned or eliminated altogether because it's just not, the thing is not working right now.
Yeah.
Especially for the price point.
And I think they have a perfect opportunity to do so because the Disco 5 at this point is aging. And there are a lot of new vehicles coming out on the market that are going back to some slightly blockier, more boxy styling. So maybe a good opportunity for Land Rover to capitalize on that trend and turn the Discovery back into something a little bit more square-jawed.
So the next point that we have on our list here is about Range Rover styling and how it all is very similar. You want to explain that?
Yeah, if you look at the Evoque, the Velar, even into the Range Rover Sport, and a little bit so into the full size, but not as much. I think the full size visually differentiates itself enough. But between the Evoque, Velar, and Range Rover Sport, I think there's a lot of very similar swoopy styling that makes you wonder why they don't try to do something a little different. Every single Range Rover is very curved. And I think, again, there would be an opportunity for them to do something a little bit boxier, a little bit more square-jawed, because just because you're in the luxury space doesn't mean you have to make a very smooth, sporty-looking SUV. You look at the G-Wagon. The G-Wagon sells very well in the most premium space of the SUV market. So I think Range Rover could try to do something a little different as far as styling and have it work. Especially, you look back at the Range Rover Classic. Once again, there's precedent for it. The Range Rover Classic was very boxy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think you're onto something. Like the sports and the full size have always looked pretty similar, and they continue to do so.
Yeah.
My problem is, like, especially on the lower end, like with the Velar and the Evoque, they kind of have their own feel, but they kind of are going after the same market in some ways. Because obviously Velar is a little bit more premium than Evoque, but you can certainly spec them to within the range of each other. Like, does the Velar really need to exist when you have the Evoque? And what is the customer difference? I'd be really interested to talk to Range Rover to find out. But Case, all really good points. So I think our takeaways are we'd love to see the brand offer more affordable versions, right? Mm-hmm. We'd love to see Land Rover continue to go in a direction of ruggedness where Range Rover goes in a direction of design.
Yeah.
I think we're both on the same page. We'd love to see like an agricultural true off-road 4x4 Defender.
Yeah, absolutely.
That more in the line of like a Bronco or a Wrangler. Discovery needs a full redesign or to be eliminated. I agree with the styling. And then I think, the Octa Smart, because it's going to tackle some of that G-Wagon world, I think. But overall, folks, the brand's doing pretty darn well. The premium thing's definitely working for them. And they're doing a heck of a lot better than Jaguar, which might be its own piece. So let us know what you think in the comment section below. Oh, One more thing we have to talk about, because all the comments are going to mention it first and foremost. Reliability. So, in my opinion, which is somewhat guided by fact, I should mention.
That's good.
The brand has actually seen a significant uptake in quality, in the last few years. I think that the peak of reliability was in the Ford era, like that 06 through 09, people typically say is the most robust. then I actually think in this latest era since 2020, under the Tata ownership, things have been looking pretty good. There's a lot of defenders out there, and folks, for the most part, seem to really like them from a quality standpoint. So I think things are getting a little better around these parts.
Yeah, absolutely. We obviously had some notable issues with our first Defender when that vehicle first came out, but it doesn't seem like that has been necessarily a consistent thing. And we now have another 4-cylinder Defender, so the exact same powertrain that had initially given us issues that we've now had in this Defender for a few months, quite a few thousand miles, and it's been all good so far. So, I agree.
Yeah, I think things are actually looking up. They still need to focus on it. It needs to be the best, I think, especially given the reputation, it has to be world leading for that to slowly start to change, but it's getting better. So I think that's good. All right, folks, that's it for today. Check out alltfl.com for more news, views, and real world reviews. Thanks for watching.